Hola, amigos, amigas, ¿qué tal? You had a good lunch? I see many happy faces. I think some of you got some very nice food here 4 years from now. My name's Oisin Lunny. I'm very honored to be your host here for the afternoon at the Agora stage. I'm a podcast host for Fortune 500 companies, an occasional journalist, event MC, occasional radio DJ as well. So find me on LinkedIn and I will send you a mixtape. And I hope you're having a great time at 4 years now. I got to say, I've been walking around the show and it really feels like Mobile World Congress is back. It's back to where it was. We came through the pandemic and through the lockdowns, and it's so exciting to see so many great people making the magic happen right here at 4 years from now. So I have a question for you all. Now, it's a bit of a leading question, but I wonder how many of you think that meeting people is important? To your personal life, to your business life? Put up your hands if you think that meetings are important. Fantastic. That's pretty much 100%. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, our next speaker is the CEO of a platform that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. I've used it many times. It's very popular in Barcelona. There's lots of meetups happening tonight. Now, in the early days of the global pandemic, Meetup CEO David Siegel had to pivot his company's business, his entire business model, from being focused on in real life community events to offering online events. So that's a big pivot. And you know, we've all been through the same pandemic, we've all been through the lockdowns. You know what a struggle that can be to get a whole company to move over. But you know, David is going to share some of his journey with you now, and it's absolutely fascinating. He has an incredible background, as well as being the CEO of Meetup, which is the largest platform for finding and building local community. He has over 20 years of experience as a technology and digital media executive, leading organizations through innovative product development, rapid revenue growth, and digital traffic acceleration. In our next presentation, you're going to learn how, as a leader, you never know when you'll face a decision that will make or break you. Ladies and gents, please give a very big, very warm 4 years from now. Welcome to the CEO of Meetup, David Siegel. Thank you.
We got a high five here. High five, there we go.
A high five,
Woo!
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
everyone. Who here has ever been to a Meetup event? Raise your hand if you've ever been to a Meetup. Yes. Okay, so if you have not been to a Meetup event or you do not have the Meetup app, as was just said, we have like dozens of events tonight in Barcelona. Many of them, most of them are actually in person. So I hope that you avail yourself of them. I might be doing yoga tonight at one of the yoga events. So if you're interested in yoga, you might see me over there. Here we go. Okay. Many of you don't necessarily know the founding of Meetup, but I want to share with you the story because it's a really important story. In 2001, 9/11, our founder, Scott Heiferman, was in his apartment building, and he went down to the lobby, and he saw many, many people just hanging around in the lobby, looking for community, looking for people, not knowing what to do with themselves. He saw people who lived on his floor, the same floor, and they were living on the same floor for like practically a decade, and he still didn't know who they were. So he's on the floor, and he looks around, and he says, it shouldn't take a tragedy to build community. Fast forward, it's now this year, June 14th, is going to be the 20-year anniversary of Meetup since the first website went live. And this right here and behind you is a whiteboard of the first schematic of what our founder had created when he decided to do the concept of Meetup, events, home, in person, which we're going to get into talking about. So a little bit about Meetup and why we're important. 46% of people globally regularly feel lonely. 46%. And among people who are Gen Zers and millennials, that percentage is as high as 62% of people who regularly feel lonely. And oh, by the way, these numbers here are prior to the pandemic. It's much, much worse since the pandemic. That's 62% in terms of sometimes regularly feeling lonely. 25% of people don't have not one trusted confidant, a person to go to in a time of need. And 89% of the time, when people have had conversations, it's been interrupted by technology. This is pretty good, though. Most of you are looking at me, not your phones. That's like, pretty good. I'll take it. And then there's Meetup. Meetup is the cure for the loneliness epidemic. With 55 million members, 330,000 groups, and 10,000 cities. By the way, Barcelona, believe it or not, is one of the top 10 global cities for Meetup. It's pretty amazing. Pretty happy about that. And we're in 193 different countries. We are not in North Korea, but maybe one day. We will see. The most important statistic that we have at Meetup is 30 million. What's 30 million? 30 million is the number of connections that we drive every single year. That's our KPI, our key performance indicator for our company. So, as was mentioned up front, what the hell did we do when you couldn't meet up? The number one reason why we turned organizers down for almost 2 decades was because they only wanted to have online meetup events. We said no online meetup events. And then we start seeing everything taking a nosedive. Almost exactly this time, February 28th, 2 years ago. We see in China, our events went down 95%. Italy, our events started going down 95%. We thought, oh, this isn't going to happen in the United States. I'm not going to have most of Europe. It's going to be an isolated thing. We were wrong, obviously. We got everyone together. And there were some people at Meetup that said, no, no, no. We're all about IRL. We're all about in person. This is our soul is about in person. In fact, our founder at one point took a sledgehammer to a VR device because he was so opposed to any kind of technology. We use technology for one reason, to get people off of technology. And they said, we can't change. And ultimately, though, I then got everyone together and I said, what's the goal? The goal of Meetup is not IRL. The goal of Meetup, the mission of Meetup, is connecting. And people need connections more than at any other time. So even though our numbers were going down, RSPs were falling down a roof, we basically then pivoted. This are the results of the pivot, and I'm going to share with you 10 best practices. So we've had over 4.7 million online events created, which is kind of like a pretty crazy number. 23 million different people have RSVP'd and attended online events during this time in 190 countries. Today, I just looked up the number today, we're 69.8% in person globally, and we're the rest online. Before we were 0 online. And I'm going to show you a heat map of which countries have the highest percentages online and in person. Kind of cool, right? Okay, so if you're from the US, you know who this person is. Someone from the US, yell out. Who's this person? David Letterman. Thank you very much. David Letterman is a famous TV personality and comedian, and he always has something that was famous for. His what? What was he famous for? Anyone? Top 10 lists. So we're going to do a top 10 list of pivoting strategies. Is that what you said? I missed it. Okay, top 10 list, pivot, the mask, it's the mask. A top 10 list of pivoting strategies so that you can understand how there's almost no greater pivot than a company that's entire existence based on in-person to be able to go online. So here are some of the things that we did. Here we go. Number one, the term pivot is an important one. It doesn't mean a step, it means a pivot. So in a pivot, you take one part of your foot, right? And you're keeping your heel on the ground, but you're moving your feet. You're moving your toes, you're keeping the heel on the ground. The important thing about a pivot is not your full-scale change. You're planting something, and that's not moving. So what do I mean by that? You're planting your heel. We planted our mission. We planted our vision. We said our mission is about empowering personal growth through real human connections. It's not about IRL. Our vision is helping people find and create communities that gather around shared interests and identities. We're not pivoting those, we're not changing those things. We're changing how we're going to do them. The reason why, because Meetup's mission is so damn important. Meetup makes people's lives better. Unlike some other technology companies whose logos you could see over there that will remain nameless. The more you use Meetup, according to a third-party study by the University of Pennsylvania, actually the happier that you even are. And there was a study in the New York Times over here that found that women, there was a study of women over 55 years old, they actually lived longer and healthier lives because of Meetup. Now that is a great reason not to pivot your mission, but to keep your mission planted like a heel. Ultimately, 89% of organizers feel that they impact people's lives more, and you can see some of the numbers. I'm not going to read them all to you. So item number 1 around pivoting is never pivot your mission. Keep your mission sacrosanct. Number 9, you need to make sure that you build a culture that supports pivoting. Anyone here ever heard of this little company, wasn't in the news very often, called WeWork? So WeWork owned Meetup during the pandemic, actually. They sold Meetup, by the way, in March of 2020. So it's been 2 years since we've separated from Meetup. Adam Newman, the founder of WeWork, who was the person who hired me, was growth, 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 growth. Kevin Ryan, who is someone who I used to work for 20 years ago at DoubleClick. He's a founder of Business Insider and MongoDB and a bunch of other companies. I brought him in. He acquired Meetup, and he's all about customer focused. Customer focused means it's not about growth, it's about what does the customers need. And fortunately, one of our values at Meetup has always been to invite change. These are our 6 core values around culture in our company. And a lot of times people have core values that are like up on a wall. Doesn't mean anything. We hire based on our core values. We promote people based on our core values. We let go of people based on not hitting our core values. So because we always had a value, not on accepting change, but inviting change. And there's a big difference between letting change happen, change is okay, I'd really rather not happen, versus inviting change. Because of that core value, and also around trust and transparency, and being honest and open and saying, hey, we may not exist anymore if we don't pivot, those core values helped us to make a very different decision than we'd ever made. First 18 years, never having really events that are online, to going all in online as needed. So number 2 item is around building a culture that supports pivoting. Number 3 is the number 1 search term on Meetup. The number 1 search term in 2021 was finding adult friends. Finding adult friends was the number 1 search term on Meetup. Pretty amazing. Not tech, even though we have lots of tech, finding adult friends. So we pivoted, and we actually, while some companies pulled back advertising, we actually spent more money on advertising last year than we ever had done in the company's history. A lot more money spent on advertising, because we said a pivot is a time to retrench and to get back out there and to get your brand out there because people need it even more. And in our advertising, we have obviously lots of ads with people with masks on them to show that you could do things outdoors and masks. Lots of outdoor-related meetups, events where we highlighted Zoom for an online type event. And it focused on just building friendships. So if you're going to pivot, then not only, number 1, do you want to have a culture around pivoting, you want to make sure you don't pivot your mission, but you want to support your pivot in terms of advertising and any other spend that you have. Okay, we actually spent a whole lot of money in advertising, YouTube, all these other places, and we found that it actually worked, by the way. So we did a lot of brand advertising. Brand advertising is a really tough thing to analyze because it's not direct advertising. What we did is we looked at some markets where we did advertising in, some markets where we didn't do advertising in, and we looked at what the difference is between them in terms of users, new user sessions, and we saw obviously a meaningful difference between the two. And then we saw things like 255% growth and people typing in the term meetups or meetups near me, meetup groups near me. When people say to you, you can't measure brand advertising, they're wrong. In many ways you can. You could see how many people are searching for your terms when it comes to looking for an event, and you could do an A/B test in terms of that. So if you're going to pivot, make sure to go even stronger in on spend and advertising than you may have done beforehand. Going to number 7. Okay, so we decided that all of our organizers, which we have 300,000 plus organizers, only knew how to run events in person, right? But running an event online is a very different experience. They didn't know how to run events online. Some of them weren't all that digital savvy, to be honest with you, and they really struggled. They didn't know what to do. So for the first time, we created something called Meetup Live. Our first event was we had the head of all of Zoom training to come to the first Meetup event online. We had tens of thousands of people looking to figure out how to use Zoom, because people hadn't used Zoom before. How do I use Zoom to move my online event to in-person, my in-person event to online. So we created something called Meetup Live, and now has over 100,000 members. It's actually the largest meetup group out there, and it's created solely for one purpose, which is to help our organizers be more successful during the pivot and now more generally. We also created a blog called Community Matters. There's almost 2 million people that have the blog right now. If you want, you could you could scan the QR code over there. If you want to get access to the blog, which is all these best practices on how to build community. We created a podcast called Keep Connected, and where we help people on, again, how to pivot their businesses, their communities, their areas to be more successful. And then the whole experience was so effing insane, and kind of being a part of WeWork, being part of Adam Newman and everything going on at WeWork, divesting from WeWork, leaving WeWork, and then running Meetup, that I actually wrote a book about it, and it's coming out next week. Very exciting, yay. Called Decide and Conquer, and there's QR code to get the book over there if anyone's interested. Okay, number 6 focus. Besides training and education are different things. Training is like a quick thing. Education is something more sustainable. So we created something called Onboarding 101. When you become an organizer, we never did this before. What are some of the best practices to onboarding to becoming a Meetup organizer? It's called Meetup, so if you pivot, you have to create an entire, we can actually create an entire curriculum that we never existed beforehand of more effective education for our organizers. So it's not just training, but a real educational curriculum. We ramped a series of emails on best practices, again, led to 25% more people attending. The next thing that we did is when you pivot your business, you need to figure out how to minimize the risk in your business, because there's a lot of risk that happens in a pivot. So we did 2 things to minimize risk. The first thing that we did is we sent out a whole bunch of templates and best practices, help people to understand the importance of trying to organize events outdoors, having backup plans when you did do events outdoors, understanding what local requirements and guidelines were. So that was one side. And the other side is online events. People didn't know how to run online. How many people here have been to these online Zoom events, and they're just horrible. They're just so boring. You just want to go out of your mind. It's a terrible experience. So we help people to make them a little bit more engaging. Things like having a scavenger hunt, how to use breakout rooms, how to set real expectations, how to use chat effectively during these things. This is stuff that people never did before, that people should consider even different timing for their events. Having more events during lunchtime as opposed to only during the evenings was something else that we found that worked in Zoom, because people were already home. They didn't necessarily have to travel places for their events. So we posted a lot in terms of how to minimize risk for online events as well. Going to number 4, we changed our technology. We changed our technology. So what do I mean by that? We set it up so that organizers can list out whether masks are required. Masks are optional. We never give the option of masks forbidden. That's not something that we allow on Meetup for important policy reasons. Though there are organizers that actually say you're forbidden to wear a mask, and we say you can't be part of Meetup anymore. But we give the options of mask optional, mask required, vaccination required, vaccination optional, outdoors, not outdoors. We want to make it as easy as possible for organizers and members to be safe. We're actually working on now integrating with health passes that are out there and systems that are out there, so we have all that information already available for people. And then it might be that people can opt in, not opt out, only opt in, to listing whether or not their status and their information, so that an organizer can make a determination whether they want to get together in person or online. We integrated with Zoom. We were integrated with 100 different video conferencing platforms, but a one-button Zoom integration. The next thing that we did at Meetup, we'd never done this beforehand, is because young people have even more challenges during this pandemic, which is so sad for anyone who has kids in college. I have a kid in college. Very, very hard for them, really hard. We made being a Meetup organizer free for anyone who's a college student. And since we did that, we've had 1,400 new organizers, all college students, over 70,000 people that are attending from college students all around the world. It's something that we're pretty proud of as well. Okay, the next thing when you're making a pivot is you need to leverage data. data is obviously essential. We're sitting on a gold mine, like trillions of data points that we have at Meetup. So one of the things that we did is we looked at data around where are people gathering in person, where are people gathering online, and this is the data for last week. Just thought I'd show it to you. So what does this mean? It means that in China and Australia and Sweden and Norway, most of Western Europe, the United States, and interestingly in Argentina specifically, vast majority of Meetup events are happening in person. And the red ones, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, etc., most of those events are happening still online. And you can see the red versus the green. That's the percentage. And the next one here is how it's changed week over week. So China's become a lot more in person. Egypt, for some reason, I'm not sure why, has gone more online as of this last week. But you can see most of the map is greenish. More and more are moving towards online. Okay, the last thing that we did is we said, now that we're pivoting, we could look for new revenue sources. So we have a B2B business. We have all these clients, Google, AWS, Grubhub, Microsoft, IBM, and they sponsor Meetup groups in the areas because they want to build relationships with all these tech Meetup groups. So we went even more invested in new business and revenue areas. So what happened? What happened since the pivot? Here we go. The number of app downloads has grown by 66%. And if you all download the app, if you don't have it, it'll be 67%. Woo! 66% increase in app downloads year over year. 30% increase in RSVPers, people attending events, this year over last year, both in the US and outside of the US. And number of events scheduled is also up 23% year over year. So little, slowly, we're creeping our way back from the challenges. These are the top 10 lists over here. Mission is forever. Support pivoting with culture. Support pivoting with advertising and best practices content. Make sure you figure out real education, how to minimize risk. Make sure your user interface and technology supports pivots. Plan for the current and the future. And that is, there we go. Leverage data and leverage new revenue sources. My email is up here, david@meetup.com. If you want to send me an email, download the app like I talked about. And if you wanted to get this, this thing that's on sale at wherever you want, then it's over here. And thank you so much for being members of Meetup. Thank you for listening today. And I hope we have an amazing and productive next few days at the conference. Thank you all so much.